there's something very obvious which needs to be pointed out. We need to step back and look at the fact that before Occupy Wall Street began, there was kind of a mocking tone about it in the media, and they said, yeah, they might be down there a week or 2 weeks. And then, after it had been going on for a month, Bloomberg said he was going to shut it down. And thousands of people, including all the major unions in the city, came, and it didn't shut down. And they said, oh, it's going to be over, it's going to be over. And there were thousands of people packed into Zuccotti Park, and they couldn't clear the park. And then on November 15th, after this harsh, horrific raid, they said, well, now that the park's cleared, Occupy Wall Street's going to be over. It's going to be done. Well, it's not done. It's still going strong. You know, it began September 17th. Began on September 17th, and now it's February, and we're still talking about it. We're still talking about the fact that all over this country, there are people pouring into the streets, confronting the state, confronting the police, standing up to the rich, and challenging the status quo. And so, with that in mind, we can talk about the repression, because the repression shows that it's something they have to do. They have to do it because people are in a state of revolt right now, and that's something we should be very, very joyous about. People are in a state of revolt. So before we get sad about the oppression that's going on, let's keep that in mind. You know, I'm going to focus mainly on the events that went on in Oakland, but the events, you know, there has been repression everywhere. Occupy DC. A video surfaced of this young man, wasn't doing anything wrong. I mean, just walking, no excuse was being used. And they walked up to him and they tased him right there. He screams, I'm not doing anything wrong. And they tased him. They're trying to send a message. You know, Occupy Buffalo was cleared very brutally as well. You know, 10 people arrested. It's all over the country. But before, now, we want to talk about, you know, Occupy for Jobs, the coalition here in New York, is calling for an emergency to be declared. An emergency to be declared due to the fact that there are over 1 million people that are unemployed in this city. Right? We're demanding that. And they're not doing anything about it. They're not thinking about it. They're not even considering it. We're having to raise this as a demand, that unemployment is an emergency. But what happened in Oakland on January 28th was I mean, it wasn't an official state of emergency, I don't think, that was declared, but they acted and they showed how briskly and quickly they can act when their system is threatened. What happened was the community, the Occupy Oakland movement, mobilized, and they mobilized in big numbers, and in response to their mobilizing, there was rubber bullets shot, there was tear gas, and all of this was done because an abandoned building, a convention center, an abandoned building, was going to be taken over by the movement. An abandoned building. 500 arrests. People put into the hospital. All kinds of injuries. Thousands of cops mobilized because an abandoned building might be taken over. And yet, there's 1 million unemployed people, and they don't even consider doing anything. But an abandoned building, that's what they'll do to defend an empty piece of property. That's the reality of the capitalist state, serving private property. People had mobilized. They wanted to protect a convention center. And to turn it into a center, a building that had been cast off. They wanted to turn it into a place where the community could use it for political education and for daycare and for community care. And the response of the state was to make sure that didn't happen, to protect private property. That's what happened in Oakland. You know, and I mean, there are glorious scenes that we've heard about. For example, you know, this thing they do where they kettle. They get their orange nets and they surround it and people can't escape and they grab them. And there was one scene that's kind of stood out in people's minds where people, you know, they were surrounded on both sides of the street and they tore open a fence and ran through it and hundreds of people escaped. But the response of the state to this movement has been so ridiculous. For example, to escape these police as they were coming down on people, one thing that they did is the YMCA, you know, opened the doors so people could flee into the YMCA. And now there's people being charged with burglary because the YMCA, the workers in the YMCA actually opened the doors and let these people come in to escape the police with their weapons and all of that. And the response is to charge them with burglary as if they broke into the YMCA. It's so horrific. And another thing to comment on is the media has been focusing so much not on the fact that people were shot with rubber bullets, not on the fact that tear gas was sprayed, but on the fact that people burned a U.S. flag. The media is more concerned about damage done to a piece of cloth which has some symbolic value than to what's being done to people by the police. That's a very harsh reality about this. You know, the fact that the U.S. flag is being burned is getting way more publicity than any of the brutality that's being done to people. But ultimately, you know, why is it that they responded so harshly to the fact that people might want to take over a convention center and an abandoned building? You know, I get responses when I go out on the trains with Workers' World. And the other day I was on the train and someone said to me, you know, I agree with a lot of the goals of Occupy Wall Street. I agree with what they're saying, but you know, Zuccotti Park, that's major property. That costs a lot of money. You can't just take over something like that. Well, as Marxists, we would disagree with that. Why? You know who laid every stone in Zuccotti Park? That was mason workers and construction workers who did it. You know who designed Zuccotti Park? That was engineers and architects. You know who cleaned Zuccotti Park? That's sanitation workers. But who owns Zuccotti Park? Brookfield Properties, a small group of capitalists. The only thing they have to do with Zuccotti Park is a sheet of paper that says Certificate of Ownership. Well, we say that the working class has the right to occupy Zuccotti Park, and not just Zuccotti Park, they have the right to occupy all the banks and all the factories, and they have the right to fight for a socialist world where the working class is in power. That's what we're saying. Occupy for socialist revolution. So, you know, hands off the Occupy Oakland demonstrators, power to the working class, and down with this system. Thank you, comrades.